All right, so welcome back into the live stream. Today, we're going to dive into XRP, give you guys kind of a rundown of some of the things that have been happening over the past week. Take a look at some price analysis on where XRP may be holding, a few other strategic moves, and then finally we'll wrap up with some sentiment discovery around what is happening with XRP over the long haul, all on a deep dive right here. Of course, it's going to be fun. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into TechPath. As you guys know, here on the show, we cover a lot, and you probably have noticed we've had a couple of differences here in the studio. We've got another set that we run here with our Metaverse Insider show. Of course, TechPath Crypto. These are the two primary shows. If you see the differences in the sets, you're going to kind of start to figure out when we're talking about Metaverse gaming and all those kind of things. It's on the other set. Really, so it's just kind of to give a different look. But I'd love to get your feedback on it. You know, we always love to do things differently here. Love to get your ideas on how we can spice up content. We are thinking about some new ideas for later this year. So anyway, lots of stuff we're going to be getting into. We'll run a couple polls today. So make sure and put your questions in the live chat. And if you're watching this after the live, make sure and drop some comments down below. We love to get that. And of course, like the video if you like it. Let's get into XRP and really kind of the news that has been going on for about since last Friday. And we did see some pretty good movement on XRP in general. But if you look at this first story, motions denied. This is a new news on the XRP case. And this, of course, is motions denied for both SEC and Ripple as the battle continues. And I think this is, again, one of the bigger factors that we will continue to see around not only discovery, but also closing arguments and just in general as we start to see a lot more activity in the case. A lot of things are going to be really moving into a space that is going to give the judges a little bit more leverage on being able to make some decisions, much like they did with Ripple on denying their fair notice defense. So I think that is, or their fair notice position in XRP's defense. But if you look back here, it says Ripple obviously argued that it was not given fair notice. That proved to be the case, that the agency would consider Ripple's XRP a security, thus denying the company a due process. Judge Torres did deny the SEC motion filed in March to dismiss the defense, and by doing so, it affirmed that its defense is viable in the suit. In other words, now XRP can essentially use that defense in a position to really either settle the case or try to go to trial. Those are really the two options that are going on right now. Garlinghouse did hail the rejection of the SEC motion as a huge win on Saturday, and of course, this is still in pleading stages, as I mentioned, so there's still likely to be many more legal maneuvers. We got a lot happening there, and of course, the point that they're making here at the end is if no settlement is reached, the outcome of this case could set a precedent. We already know that would affect cases against crypto companies for the foreseeable future. I think there's a lot moving in the space right now around what they're trying to do, meaning XRP, meaning Ripple, and the strategies that they're taking over what this position was. And I think a lot of people already kind of knew this was going to happen. They weren't completely positive, but for the most part, we had a lot of people kind of leaning into that this fair notice defense would in fact be approved, and that was it's a big deal. But the thing that they threw out, or in this particular case they threw out on the Ripple side of things, was to try to get the case dropped. And of course, I think the judge obviously sees there's something there, so we'll continue to see some maneuvers moving around in the scenario here. There are some interesting aspects to where the token is going, though, and there's a lot here. I want to jump to just a quick review on one of the price predictions, so to speak. Ripple XRP, obviously the price soared above the downtrend line on March 11th. This was back on last Friday, but the rally did meet with some resistance at 85 cents. And this does suggest that the bears have not given up, and and they want to continue to sell on these rallies. And this is something that we have seen. If you kind of look here, let me kind of zoom in on this one a little bit tighter. If you kind of look at these downtrends and then these uptrends that we've had right here and right here and here, we are seeing that sell-off after these rises do occur. So it isn't a surprise, even though this right here, the downtrend that we're playing in right now, is a little bit more, I think, tighter to it. We haven't seen as much volatility, so I think we've got a lot yet to really kind of uncover here in terms of price action going in the future. And there is some things that are showing up in sentiment that has not showed up, I think, in the charts yet. So we're going to talk about that today. But the price has pulled back to the 20-day exponential moving average, the EMA, down to 75 cents, which is likely to act as a strong support. If the price rebounds off the current level, the buyers will make one more attempt to push it and sustain the XRP price above 85. They think that this could get a rally somewhere in the range of about 90 cents up to around $1. So good news, I think, in the sense that, it's a small wins, but I think obviously we have a lot happening in the marketplace right now where there's Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin, just the overall sentiment of what's happening on the global stage. And then I think in general, legislation starting to loom in on, even though I think we still have a lot of positive elements coming from Biden's executive order, in the sense that we could see some at least positive moves from a regulatory standpoint. I still think it's going to be a ways off before we really see any action on those things, but there is a lot happening, I think, that helps kind of move in on this. Ripple also appears to be on the brink of a significant price movement. Now, he goes on to really kind of talk about this, that it's gaining momentum for a breakout. It's approaching the apex of their symmetrical triangle on its daily chart, still the direction of the trend that will be determined after a break of support. And that's what happened when we saw this happen over the weekend. But it does appear to be gearing up for significant price movement after consolidating for over the near 3 months. The cryptocurrency market has kicked off on Monday. This obviously kicked up, but we did not see Ripple really take off with a lot of action. So I think the key here will be if we are looking at some pent-up demand for Ripple and also some strategic moves that I think some investors are taking right now, probably positioning for when Ripple either one settles or wins. But if it's a settlement, which I still think most likely it's going to be, the immediate action after that settlement is going to be pretty big. Now, will we see it go to $5? I don't think that's the kind of growth it will take, even if, and that's only if, of course, if we're still in these bullish trends towards Bitcoin and towards the overall coin market. But if we are seeing this maybe at the end of this year or early next year for, let's say it's a case win, then that kind of changes my whole prediction of whether or not this could go to $5. So there's short-term things. The good thing is it's all, I think, all upside from here forward for XRP. I think they are positioning, whether they do this in a position of a victory or whether they do this in a position of a settlement, one way or the other. So here it is right here, Ripple lawsuit, huge victory, just reinforcing what this victory means. The fair notice, just simply saying, hey, guys, we can now defend against that. But the SEC is failing to notify that it was doing illegal securities. This rolls into the whole aspect around the Hinman emails, which really will be the next phase of the case. If the Hinman emails are taken into consideration and considered a position by the SEC, by the courts, then it really creates a very interesting dynamic for the SEC at that point. I think they're going to have to kind of back off and probably lick their wounds, because I think they will, in essence, lose this case. They've already lost a pretty big defense posture as it is right now. So lots happening in and around this area. So, and there is some movement within the SEC just in general of what that might be, but also the other aspect of what Ripple is doing is they're really starting to expand beyond the component of what you're seeing in the typical growth of being the banker's token and really kind of focusing in on cross-border payments. Now they, of course, are focused in here on the NFT and metaverse side of things, and of course that focus is really built around them announcing their onboarding of over 4,000 musicians, content creators, game designers, other artists into its NFT platform with a creator fund that was worth more than $250 million, which is, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I felt like this would be a good thing. I did not realize how big that they had really rolled this out. 4,000 creators is a lot to be able to onboard. So I think that was a huge win for them. They launched this thing back in September. Their blockchain producer is aiming to support artists and creative agencies, Mintable, Mint NFTs, VSA Partners, NFT Pro, Eternal Labs. All of this is going to be on XRP. So I think this, again, just shows that even though we've got something happening over here with Ripple, there's so many other things that Ripple is doing to essentially pave the way for the success of Ripple and its future, whether it's cross-borderless payments, whether we get them into a scenario where they truly are going to be competing with Swift, and what could be a very interesting aspect, and that is them expanding this notion of really kind of Ripple's overall powerhouse in the blockchain into a lot of other sectors, such as NFT and metaverse. So many cool things happening. I thought this was an interesting story right here, or just an interesting feature. It's a product called Estate Up, and it's basically going to allow you to, it's built on XRP, but the issue is for people that are, maybe you're winding down in years, and I don't want to say it that way, but you're just doing life planning, and you're worried about whether it's a will or those kind of things. It's very difficult right now to be able to position those. I know with me, I'm looking at trust and things of that nature, long-term exits, things of that nature that really protect your family. And one of the things, as we see crypto over the next 10, 15, 20 years, for a lot of you that are investing that, you might be looking at, how do I leave this wealth to my family, because I'm growing this to my kids, to whatever the situation is for you. And the need is real of being able to get this into some sort of tokenized format. So what they're doing here is they're talking about essentially creating a digital will on XRP to allow people to redistribute their digital assets and move on. Remember, probate lawyers charge a certain percentage, and also size of the property, because anytime you have a probate, it's a big problem in what your fees are. You're talking about $30,000 or more. It kind of depends on what it is. But wills are physically stored on paper. People sometimes lose them. Now, granted, could you lose your digital IDs? I think the key there is if you start to deposit that in many places, whether it's with an attorney, deposit box, or something of that nature, so people can get to these things. I just found it very interesting that they were building this on XRP, because that tells me long-term potential opportunity. Speaking of that, when you think about long-term, of course, I Trust Capital, our partner for the show today, a big, if you're into crypto and you're really looking at long-term plays here, one of the best things you can do, of course, is jump into a crypto IRA. We use them. I love this product. It's one of the best, I think, out there on the market, just in the terms of overall offering and what they do. The thing that really is interesting to me is this right here. They have a lot of education, and I love the security aspect, but really it boils down to what kind of tokens can I gain access to it. And they've really opened up on a lot of the metaverse side of things with Axie, Decentraland, obviously Bitcoin, Chainlink, Polkadot, Ethereum. These are the most active out there. But if you look at their new projects here, you've got Avalanche now in here, Tezos, Polygon, all in here and available. And then, of course, just a ton of assets that you can really operate within it. So it's like a mini exchange. You can trade within your iTrust account and be able to still not have to pay taxes on that. I know we're getting close to tax season. You can still take a IRA, by the way, and still take it out as a tax benefit for 2021 right now, if you hit it before the April 15th deadline. So some cool stuff. Check out, they're doing $100 in funding rewards. So just check the link below. You'll be able to find that. Let's jump to the poll real quick, because I wanted to find out what you guys think around this aspect. What will happen to XRP price when the SEC case is settled and over? All right, so we think it's going to moon to the top 3. Nothing depends on Bitcoin. That's an interesting, that's a pretty large position right there, depending on Bitcoin. 60 cents though, 66% though, pushing into mooning. Going to be interesting, because I think I'm more on the camp of the 29% there. I don't think we'll see massive movement unless we've got an active traditional Bitcoin and altcoin market on the move. Now, if we've got it even in a potential move, something like this, timing is going to be everything on how this all comes together. So lots happening. When you think about timing, this is something that I look at often, and that is whale alert. This was 231 million XRP wired by FTX, Binance, KuCoin. All this is happening while XRP was trending on Twitter. And if you think about this, there's a couple of things that can be going on here. Of course, people couldn't just be parking this, but it is an interesting aspect here, because the whale alert service, which obviously tracks large amounts of crypto transferred on the blockchain, has spotted 7 hefty XRP transfers conducted by several large digital exchanges. More than half of this XRP amount, 100 million coins, has been wired to a single lump sum. In the meantime, Ripple affiliated cryptocurrency remains in the red by dropping around 12% in the last 3 days. So what is going on with this $230 million of XRP, especially as they land it into some of these top exchanges? The exchanges that were involved in this were FTX, Bittrex, Binance, KuCoin, and then the Mexican crypto Bitso. So, I do watch this. And if you guys aren't a follower of this Twitter account, if you are in the space, this is a good one to check. I check it every day, sometimes a couple times a day, because I'm really looking for very specific tracks around big movement, because it usually indicates something's happening in the space. And this was just the You Today notice right here on Twitter that they were really identifying. This is another Twitter account that I follow pretty heavily as well. The other thing that I'm looking at is the growth of the sectors. And when I think about how XRP is laying groundwork, they're going to need partners. They're going to need assistance. And one thing that I'm noticing here is FTX is starting to play into a lot of very strategic moves. They were granted a crypto license with Dubai, and they are planning potentially an HQ move, which I think is very strategic in the potential of Dubai being a new, think of it as a new Switzerland or a new maybe Silicon Valley, but crossed with Switzerland, what that might look like, especially with not only exchanges, but some of the big projects and the kind of the strategies that what could be happening from a regulatory standpoint in Dubai could be very interesting of how things could be rolling out as XRP and other big projects start to really accelerate when we do see these projects start to move back up into position. A lot of juicy tweets this week. This one right here obviously was the Brad Garlinghouse that kind of rocked the world last Friday. If you weren't paying attention, you should be. Huge win for Ripple, all talking about that the order was filed. You also saw this one right here from High Vibe Assets. This was an interesting one. Obviously, they just showed the highlight of what was happening on the motion. This one was very interesting too, and this is more in tune with, actually, let me pull this one right here. This one was a tweet that really kind of showcased what was happening right here with the Democratic SEC commissioner setting to leave after their term ends in June. Now, what does that mean, and how does this play into all of this? But if you look at Allison Lee and kind of just what in general we've seen from the SEC, I think what is looking at here is much like these cycles of many of these executives and these regulators, so to speak, officials, starting to look at different ways to get out of what could be bullseye targets for the SEC, just in the sense of the SEC really facing a lot of challenges around this one case being XRP. What this might tune into, I'm just kind of wondering if we are seeing more people within the organization starting to maybe look elsewhere, for work, because maybe they see something that's writing on the wall, or possibly a scenario where there's a lot of legislation scenarios that they're going to have to be dealing with that is going to just create crazy workloads. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting thing. This is over here from Esoteric XRP. Huge XRP news. Earlier video posted about a guy who revealed that Wells Fargo had been training on Swift. And then the replacement, now he gets an online service agreement update from Wells Fargo talking about a real-time payment and clearinghouse, a Ripple partner. So real-time payments and clearinghouse, RTP, he is a Ripple partner. And this could be, as I said, kind of those domino effects that start to occur with many of the Swift participants, because all you need is a handful of these bigger banks to really kind of take us into the next direction for where XRP could be going. So if you take a look at all of this, from news, the court cases, new innovation around NFTs, the expansion on a global level, then you look at kind of the dynamic of what's happening within the SEC, and then you look at the dynamic of what will be happening, and apparently already is happening, with major bank organizations starting to move into this direction. It is what Brad Garlinghouse has been talking about for a very, very long time. And if you look at our own crypto power index, let me kind of just jump over here. So we do our crypto power index is pretty simple. We do a top 10 and a top 20 altcoin ranking each week. And then occasionally we'll drop in our top 20 metaverse, our blockchain gaming, and then some of our low cap gaming. But this week, I wanted to go to our top 10 because this will give you XRP along with all the other primary ones. Let me kind of zoom out for this. Let's jump over here to XRP right here. All right, so what we're looking at is this. You've got 3 lines here, and each one of them represent either one, the overall market sentiment, which is the white line, the sentiment of the particular asset, meaning XRP, and then the amplification score of that same asset. Now, back here, this is back when XRP had a little bit of a run right here, and then a little bit of downturn, and kind of hanging somewhat, when you think about amplification, somewhat with what market sentiment has been. Overall sentiment tracking, in most cases, tracking higher than amplification. And this is the way that the CPI works. If you have sentiment and amplification getting very close to each other, and or amplification starts to over-index, it usually means we're going to see a potential price volatility in the upward direction. Same thing can happen when it starts to separate, meaning if amplification starts to fall off but sentiment is still holding, that usually gives us a little bit of a pre-indicator that we could see a downward trend in a particular project. So what they've done here is you went from a 72.15 last week on 3.7 to a 72.33. Now I know that's not a lot here on AMP, but look right here, 73.18 all the way to 74.08. Just last week, this of course is Monday's data. We go back 12 data points back into the cycle here so you can kind of watch the growth of where it is. But I think what is happening is we're seeing a little bit of a coil up right here, along with somewhat of a stabilization of the overall market. And with that being the case, and the potential of all these little elements that are kind of being put into place, it's not going to take much from a legislative standpoint or from a legal standpoint to move XRP quickly into maybe a plus dollar position. So I think that is where the short term could roll out. What obviously we'll be looking for is any kind of indicator that's moving Bitcoin, whether we see a downward trend and or a upward trend with Bitcoin. The likelihood is we're going to see XRP right there on its coattails, especially as we start to see this thing move along. So it's going to be interesting to go into. I want to get to a few questions today and jump into these. And I think, as you guys, I know you have a lot of questions about just in general, do you think it's a long-term play? Is it a short-term? Do you do a spot trade? Maybe do something like a swing on XRP. I bought some on Friday with that, looking at and maybe trying to do a swing trade over the weekend. Missed a swing trade opportunity, but ended up saying, hey, listen, I feel good about this. I'm gonna go ahead and continue to ride out that position. But again, remember, this is not financial advice. Something to you guys, just very simple. We do these market movers pretty straight up. We're going to give you education, a little bit of research, and then give you some of our own data insights. Hopefully, it points you in the right direction. Let's get over to the questions here. Revved Up Biker, I reckon XRP will be allowed on exchanges when the end of the lawsuit comes. I would agree for that for sure. Now, it may surface on some exchanges faster. So let's say a settlement comes into place versus a win. If we get a settlement, the settlement will be swift because once that comes through, most likely it's already going to have happened when it hits. The question is how many exchanges are coiled up, ready to go, because we will see a massive volatility. So I think obviously exchanges win on this, but it will be interesting to watch. Philly Dav, let's go in. Being an XRP holder since 2019. Wow, you're killing it. And doing nothing but researching, I believe it will be put into action overnight, and the green candle will look amazing when it happens. I'm back in your camp on that. Again, I still feel like we've got a little bit of scenario that has to play into this with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is still a instigator of the market, and I think it still has a little bit of, if we want to see XRP really take off, it's going to take off, sure. But in whether that is, hey, maybe it hits 150 or it hits a $2 or could go to maybe as high as $3, even in a somewhat stale or bear market, that's a possibility with just the news of a settlement. But I'm looking for something more long-term and what this might look like from a 3 to 5 year outlook. I know many of you are probably just trying to, hey, listen, I invested so long ago, I just want to look at my exit plan, whatever that might be. Mob, okay, where are you buying XRP? I cannot really kind of talk about it. You can't buy it on any exchanges right now. I will say there are ways for you to get to XRP. There's a handful of places that you can do it. I'm sure that the chat will probably help you out. They'll give you some ideas of where you can gotta go to get it. Let's go in here with Thomas. What's the real valuation of XRP if they win the case in the SEC overall? Will it hit over $10? Listen, if they go to court and go to trial, this is probably going to be another 6 to 8 months down the road, which could lean into the Bitcoin cycles. And if they were to win it in a Bitcoin cycle, that could be huge. That would be definitely something that I'd be looking at XRP, maybe doing a 10x for sure. At least that's what I feel like. But again, it's just one of those things. There's a lot of leaning in factors that have to happen for XRP. You're still going to have the, just the pent up demand of people that have not been able to get to it. That may be much broader than we think. I mean, the sentiment scores continue to surprise me, because if you look at sentiment all the way back to January, right here, let's go back here when sentiment was at its lowest on January 17th, after it had fallen from a 71 all the way down to a 68. Market was low. Amplification was low. I mean, you had that bottom out of the market right there when Bitcoin was like around the $30,000 mark. Everything was kind of falling, but sentiment popped right back up and really started to kind of hold up here in these higher positions. And anytime you have that happening, there is pent-up demand, because a lot of people are essentially jumping into the project. And again, it's been at a pretty good price, so a lot of people maybe dollar cost averaging, etc., versus what they were doing maybe last November when XRP was a little bit higher. So, Oblix, seen so many great news for XRP in the past. It hardly did anything price-wise. This was prior to the lawsuit. Yes, but prior to the lawsuit, I think there was a different approach to XRP. It's kind of like, it's kind of like a girlfriend you can't have. It's that kind of thing. I think a lot of people, this has probably been better for XRP just because of the amount of news and information that's being put out into the space. A lot of people were not even aware of what this token was. Now people are completely educated on what this token does, what its future is, and what it can do. And while all of this lawsuit has been happening for the past almost 2 years, guess what they've been doing? They've been packing up all of these partnerships, doing big deals. And when they flip the switch on this, now you've got a much more mature product, a much more mature ecosystem. I think things change really quickly. Bobby Townsend, Bitcoin will lose dominance once XRP is declared not a security, and we'll read the crypto market will change. I think, okay, that's an interesting aspect. We won't be watching Bitcoin for market move. Maybe, but I feel like Bitcoin is still, Godzilla, and I just don't see it really changing anytime soon. Anthony, we say they're in a bear market. How high will XRP go in this market? Again, I think that's the $1 to $3 range, even with a win or a settlement. I don't necessarily see us going much beyond that. Crackerjack, it won't moon, not on this market right now. Would agree. Melvin, till moon right after, because everything else is still tied to Bitcoin. I think you guys are on the same track of how these things cycle in, and also how this market is so tied to where Bitcoin is. But I will say this, don't sleep on what's happening right now on this sentiment, because I think there's some very interesting things happening with a market that has been very volatile in the overall trends versus what has been happening with XRP holding at such a high sentiment and really maintaining that amplification score at a fairly high. Let me look back at the charts right here. I mean, you're looking back all the way for a month back here, and you still had amp scores over 70. And 70 is kind of the threshold that we start to really pay attention. 70 scores, or a 70-point score above on an amplification, is a good indicator, because it's a strong community. There's a lot being shared about it, etc. That usually drives price action within the market. And then if you get a catalyst such as a Bitcoin move, something of that nature, things can move. So it's definitely flying high right now and in a good position. Eric, a lot of people sold their XRP just to wait for the FOMO, and XRP will explode like crazy. I don't know. I think, yeah, there are a lot of people kind of holding that were pre-lawsuit, obviously they took a lot of hits in terms of value. But I think now what we're dealing with is hopefully many of you were in dollar cost average mode or at least accumulation and looking at XRP in a long-term position. And again, long-term position, I want you to think past this lawsuit, because if you think past this lawsuit and you can believe that Ripple is partnering up with these banks, is partnering up with potentially a swift replacement, you have to consider what the potential is. It's like any other tech company. Ripple is treated and should be treated like any other tech company that's doing innovation at scale and has put together a lot of great partnerships. If you believe in that, then you should be looking at projects like this, because there's a lot of those kinds of projects out there. The one thing that's holding back XRP, of course, has been this whole regulatory cloud that's basically looming over the project as a whole. All right. One more question. I think stacking XRPs, once XRP gets clarity in the value derived from its actual utility, yes. But I do believe that we do have a lot more people that are much more clear on what XRP is and how it's used and why it's used. So I think that, in essence, again, was probably the big win that Garlinghouse, listen, bad press is good press. And I think that's what they've been faced with. The potential for a pent-up demand here is real. All right, you guys are listening in over on the podcast right now. Listen, this is great that you're there. We love it. iTunes, Spotify, give us some stars, give us some, if podcasting is your thing, that's no problem. We do these shows on the audio version just for that purpose. But the best place to catch all of these charts and a lot of the analysis that we do here on the CPI is right here on the YouTube channel. You've got to come over here, because this is where all the good stuff is. Make sure and join in on the Diamond Circle. Remember, we are doing giveaways, but we're only doing them through the email process. So next week, I'm going to be announcing on the show a giveaway where we'll be notifying our winners via email. That's the way we'll do it. And then we'll announce them in our email, our Diamond Circle email, to make it a little bit more private. It is a private group. We do a lot of guides. We do a lot of AMAs and stuff that doesn't make it over here to the YouTube channel. So just jump in on that. You can get to it pretty easily. You want to reach me? It's out on Twitter. Catch you next time right here on TechBath.